Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. This is Lucas here, and today I'll be reading A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. A Bad Case of Stripes. Camellia Cream loves lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camellia was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today, she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed, too. Oh my heavens, she cried. You're completely covered with stripes. This was certainly true. Camellia was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camellia's forehead. Do you feel all right? She asked. I feel fine, Camellia answered. But just look at me. You'll get back in bed this instant, her mother ordered. You're not going to school today. Camellia was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camellia. Most extraordinary, he exclaimed. I'd never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, itches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching? No, Camellia told him. I feel fine. Well then, Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you'll know where to reach me. And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school started laughing at Camellia. They called her Camellia Cream and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everyone were normal. But when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, Let's see some purple polka dots. Sure enough, Camellia turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, Checkerboards! And a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon, everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camellia was changing faster than you can change on a TV. Change channels on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms and a school principal called, I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream, she said. I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camellia home from school. She's just too much of a distraction. And I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious. Camellia was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago, everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart? He asked. No, thank you, sighed Camellia. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. I think I better ring in the specialist. We'll be right over. About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in this long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Yawn. The specialists went to work on Camellia. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. Well, it's not the mumps, concluded Dr. Group, or the measles, said Dr. Sponge. Definitely not chickenpox, put in Dr. Cricket, or sunburn, said Dr. Yawn. Try these, said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. Take one of each before bed, said Dr. Droop. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camellia took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different. But then, when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in a mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Grood and Mr. Miller were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camellia was poked and prodded, looked at him and listened too. The expert wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Grood finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus ball appeared all over Camellia, or possible some form of bacteria, said Mr. Miller. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camellia was covered with different colored fungus bulges. The expert looks at Camellia and at each other. We need to go over these numbers again back in the lab. Dr. Group explained. We'll call you when we know something. But the expert didn't have a clue, much less than a cure. But by now, the TV news had found out Camellia. Reporters from every channel were outside her house telling the story of the Blazer case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The Creams were slapped with all kinds of remedies from physiologists, archaeologists, herbalists, nutritionists, physics, and old medicine man, a group, and even a veterinarian. So each so-called cure, but added to poor Camellia's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental theorist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with the room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and the two paintings were her eyes. The theorist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Tried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. She began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said. These might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I bet you like some. Wouldn't you? She asked Camellia. Camellia wanted a big heap and plate full of lima beans, more than just about anything. But she was still afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, said the old woman, said Sally. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bags and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she's been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Said Camilla. Suddenly, for branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said an old woman. I knew the real you was in there, somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterwards, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at the school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of her stripes again. Lee Ann. I hope you enjoyed this book. Please like and subscribe our channel. Thank you.